All right, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Out here on Clark's Hill, and wanted to talk about the 5 best baits that you're going to need for the fall. I'm going to talk about the 5 baits you need, all of which are going to be available at Hadden Outdoors. So make sure you stop by, check them out, talk to them about the fall bite. They're going to be able to point you in the right direction too. And then I'm also going to talk about some options from 5 Bass Tackle for a couple of these baits, and then also the ALX rods that you could be pairing with these baits. So the hope is after you watch this video, you can have the rods and reels you need and all the baits you need, and if you have these 5 things on the deck, you're going to catch more bass, I promise. So thank y'all for tuning in. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe button so you don't miss out on anything, and let's go after it. Fall is really starting to set in on us here. It was in the 40s this morning. I had to wear a sweatshirt and sweatpants for the first time since, March or April. So it's really excited, and what that gets me thinking about is, of course, fall fishing. So fall fishing is an interesting time of the year, especially on these southeastern reservoirs. So your Clark's Hill, Lake Lanier, Hartwell, places like that. The fish are moving a lot, and there's lots of different ways you can approach them. All right, guys, so one of the things we all think about during the fall is the topwater bite. And if you guys have watched this channel, you know I am a sucker for some topwater. So one of the 5 baits that you're definitely going to need for the fall is a topwater. And specifically, using this to talk about some of the kind of treble hook topwater, so your whopper ploppers, poppers, stuff like that. A lot of the bait this time of year is small, so you can see I've got this kind of 90 size Chopo on there. Small poppers are also really good. A lot of times I'm going to be throwing this either directly at schoolers, or I might be throwing this up around shallow cover. Once these fish are kind of moving into the backs of these creeks, they're getting up around cover, they're schooling on these little bait fish. That's going to be kind of my target. I've got this paired with 30-pound braid, a 3-to-1 reel, and this is on actually a Icos Hammer 7, so it's kind of a heavy rod. It's got a lot of good tip to it, so I can really bomb this lure, and then I don't have to worry about if I am throwing up in shallow cover. The Hammer 7 has got a ton of backbone, ton of power to get that fish out of there. I'm not going to have to worry about it. So definitely want to have a small topwater. Like I said, your kind of plopper style baits, poppers are going to be really good in the fall. You're imitating that small kind of wounded bait fish that's moving real slow across the top of the water. It's going to get annihilated. So make sure you're throwing one of those. All right. If I had to guess, one of the other big things that most people think about during the fall is throwing a crankbait. Now, I throw a crankbait almost all year round. It's, again, one of those lures that's always on my deck. I'm a one-trick pony in many ways. I do more than one trick, but there's not a lot of tricks I do, but crankbaiting is one of them. So I've got this ALX Icos Hustler. Is going to be your perfect all-around crankbait rod. If you had to pick one rod for fall cranking, this is it. That's all you need. Small crankbaits, again, typically the fish are going to be shallow in the fall. They're going to be chasing small bait. So stuff like your square bills, your little flat-sided crankbaits. This is a 6th Sense, things like a Berkeley Fritz side, your Strike King 1.5s, 2.5s. Those style baits are really going to be a big player in the fall. No matter where you're at in the country, that's going to be a good one. So make sure you've got a small crankbait. I would throw it on a 6-speed reel, so your 6.4s to 6.8s. depending on what cover you're throwing at, 10 to 15 pound line is probably going to do you pretty well. I've got this on 15 right now because if I am throwing this thing, I'm throwing it up in the nasty stuff. I'm trying to bump it off of some heavy cover and get those fish out of there. So make sure you've got a assortment of crankbaits. I have got another video that you guys should check out if you want to learn more about some of these small crankbaits, these shallow crankbaits. So we'll talk about it more there, so go check that one out. But make sure you got one of these on the deck in the fall. Make sure you've got an ICOS Hustler to throw it with. I promise this thing loads like a dream. You will, lose a lot less fish than some of the other crankbait rods you might have tried. This thing is a must-have. It'll throw anything from this big heavy square bill to really small light crankbaits. All you got to do is change your line size and of course your reel settings, but this rod can do it all. So anything that's, less than 15 foot or so crankbait wise, the Hustler's all you need. So have a crankbait tied on this fall. Bounce it off a rock, bounce it off a cover, throw it around those shad balls that are in the backs of the creeks. You're going to catch some fish. All right, y'all. So another thing that I think at least you should always have with you in the fall is going to be a Shaky Head. So of course I've got a 5 bass tackle ridge kicker here, and I know we think about fall, we think about crankbaits, we think about spinner baits, we think about topwater, and obviously that's how you want to catch them. Now there are still going to be these high pressure bluebird sky days after a big front, after a storm, after a big cold snap, where those fish are going to be a little bit more lethargic. They're not going to be wanting to chase those moving baits, and so you need to have something on your deck to adjust to those conditions and be able to slow down a little bit, maybe do a little bit more finesse, and then kind of figure out what those fish are up to, maybe why they're not biting your moving baits. So the ridge kicker is going to be a great asset. As a finesse bottom bait, you can kind of, what I call it is getting vertical. So in the fall, the fish are on their way back in the back of the creeks. They're following the shad, and so you can get vertical, and a ridge kicker, Shaky Head, is a great way to do that. You find where these channel swings are, and of course we want the fish to be up shallow and eating, but if there is a cold snap or it's post frontal, they might pull off to that channel swing, and then you can get vertical and you can figure out that depth that they've kind of settled into. And then a Shaky Head is going to be a great way to approach those fish and show them something that maybe not everyone else is throwing. So I know people think of a Shaky Head as, oh, it's just catching small fish, it's just for a limit or whatever, but I promise you, if you throw this thing this fall, you're going to be surprised about how many 3, 4, 5 pounders you catch on it, because those fish, they see all these moving baits. They see 1,000 spinner baits and 1,000 crankbaits, but the Shaky Head comes by, they're going to have to slurp it up. So make sure you've got a ridge kicker with you. Check out an ICOS Soul 73 or a Soul 7. It's going to be one of my favorite ways to throw it on. Check out an Enox Hunch as well. That's a great way if you prefer throwing a Shaky Head on a bait caster. So make sure you all check those out and have one on your deck this fall. All right, guys. So another thing you're going to need this fall, and this is one that people forget. Now, we talked about a Shaky Head as a way to kind of clean up those fish when it's higher pressure, whether that's a lot of anglers that are pressuring the fish or whether it's high barometric pressure, it's post frontal, tough conditions, whatever it might be. That Shaky Head is going to be helpful. The other thing that people forget about is a jig or a sliding jig, whether it's your traditional skirted jig or a sliding jig like this 5 bass tackle flat lock. So a lot of people, they want to move fast, they want to chase those fish in the fall, and there is definitely a time and a place for that. But when you find a place that those fish are stacked up, a lot of times if you find a few fish, there'll be more there. So, if you've run your crankbait through, you've loaded that Hustler up a few times, you've caught a few fish, but they kind of die out, maybe you can still see them on your electronics, but they're not getting them to bite. I would encourage you to throw a jig down there, whether it's a flat lock, whether it's your traditional jig, whatever it might be. Throw that down there, drag it across that rock or whatever it is that you're targeting, and show those fish a little bit something different. They get really in tune to the shad. It can be tough to make them bite something that is imitating a shad because they get so dialed in on that little tiny bait. So sometimes you just got to show them something different. It's like, you know, if you're down at the Golden Corral and you've had just all the chicken and mac and cheese you can eat, but then you look over there and it's like, ooh, there's the chocolate fountain. You know, maybe this is the chocolate fountain to the bass. I don't know. But throw that jig there, throw a flat lock down there. It's going to be something, you might not get a ton of bites on it in the fall, but I'm telling you, when you need Gertrude, you need that big bite, this one's going to be a good thing to throw at them. You may not get a ton of bites, but typically they're going to be your better than average bites. So never count out a jig. I would always have one on the deck pretty much year round, but especially in the fall. Make sure you've got a jig that you can pitch at some of the shallow cover, or just clean up an area that you've already caught them with a moving bait. So have this on your deck. Get you a Promise 73 Zolo toad face. Those are going to be some perfect jig rods, and yeah, make sure you have it on your deck. All right, guys, there's one more bait, and you might be able to see it here. This one is, I would say, kind of the Mac Daddy for fall. Now, there are days when you can lock a buzzbait in your hand and not put it down from, you know, dark till dark, and you will catch fish all day long. Those are my favorite days. A buzzbait is one of my absolute favorite ways to catch bass. No matter where I'm at in the country, if I can catch them on a buzzbait, you know, that is what I'm doing. But the fall is definitely a time where a lot of people are thinking of throwing a buzzbait. This ALX Zolo Toadface is going to be a great rod for that. But make sure you have a buzzbait. I would say your 3/8 to ½ ounce. I think typically the ones that make a clacking noise are going to be really good, so I like these ones where the blade hits the head. You can also tune it if you just like squeakers. You can tune it to where it just squeaks. I throw a Zoom Z-Craw on the back. You'll almost if ever, never, like, I throw just a Zoom Z-Craw on the back. I never have a skirt back there. That's really all I throw. I throw white. I don't think the head color and the blade color matter all that much. So white Zoom Z-Craw Junior, 3/8 to 1/2 ounce buzzbait. I pair that with a 7-speed reel, so like 7.5, 7.3 to 1, something like that. And then 17-pound fluorocarbon. That's really all you need. I do not like braid. I think you're gonna pull a lot of buzzbaits out of fish's mouths. So this fluorocarbon and this toad face really help load up really nicely, and then you get that good solid hook set without ripping the bait out of the bass's mouth. This thing, like I said, you can catch fish all day on it, but the big fish, you know, I can't tell you how many just giants I've caught in the fall on a buzzbait. And especially on those days where you're not getting a lot of bites on it, like, keep throwing it, keep throwing it, keep throwing it. Another thing people will say is like, oh, you know, once the sun gets up, you might as well put it down. Don't listen to that. I promise. Throw this thing when the sun's up. I would say, you know, if you've got a decent limit at, you know, 1, 2 o'clock, pick this sucker up and just cover as much water as you can. And I promise that's what Gertrude is going to eat. Caught some giants at the end of the day in the fall on a buzzbait. So make sure you've got it on your deck. All right. All right, guys, so we talked about 5 baits that you need to have on your deck for fall. We talked about small top waters, we talked about crankbaits, we talked about having a shaky head like a 5 bass tackle ridge kicker, we talked about having a jig or a flat lock sliding jig, and then we talked about a buzzbait. So there's obviously all sorts of other baits. Those are just my 5 favorites. If you guys have 5 favorites or a different top 5 than me, you know, let me know down in the comments. Tell me where I goofed up, and you know, maybe I should reconsider and make a different video with some different rankings. But those are going to be my top 5. They're what I'm confident in. I know I can go out in the fall and catch fish on those 5 baits. So if you guys do, I promise you will too, especially if you're on Clark's Hill, other southeastern reservoirs. But this should work across the country, so make sure you've got those baits on the deck. You can't go wrong. All right, thanks y'all for tuning in, and keep chasing them.